The meeting was supposed to be a formality. Warren Beatty had been developing a political thriller for 18 months. Sharp script, strong director attached, financing almost in place. He walked into a conference room at a major studio in February 1968, expecting to finalize the deal. Instead, he walked into an intervention. 5 men sat around the table, studio heads, financiers. One man whose name Beatty recognized from Washington, someone with connections that went beyond Hollywood. Nobody smiled when Beatty sat down. The most senior executive spoke first. "Warren, we need to talk about this project." Beatty leaned back. "I'm listening. We've read the script multiple times, and we have serious concerns." "About what?" "About everything." The executive slid a folder across the table. Inside, notes, analysis, market research. "This is a political film," the executive said, "explicitly critical of American foreign policy, released during a war. That's not just risky, it's reckless." Beatty didn't touch the folder. "It's a film about corruption," he said. "Not about the war specifically. It's set against the war," another man said. "It's about complicity, about power protecting itself while soldiers die. You don't think audiences will make that connection?" "I think they should make that connection," Beatty replied. The room went cold. "If you think this is a story about Hollywood discovering politics in the 1960s, you're missing the point. Hollywood had always been political, just quietly, carefully, in ways that didn't threaten access to power or money. By 1968, the country was fracturing. The Vietnam War had turned from a distant conflict into a national crisis. Protests were spreading. Young people were questioning everything. The establishment, political, cultural, economic, was under siege, and Hollywood's power structure was deeply, irrevocably tied to that establishment. Studio heads had relationships with politicians, with defense contractors, with the same institutions the anti-war movement was targeting. Making a film that criticized American foreign policy wasn't just an artistic choice, it was a political one, and political choices had consequences. The men in that room understood those consequences intimately. They'd seen what happened to artists who went too far. Blacklists, frozen careers, projects that never got made. They weren't threatening Warren Beatty with prison or exile. They were threatening him with something more effective: irrelevance. The man from Washington spoke for the first time. "Warren, you're a talented actor. You've made smart choices. Bonnie and Clyde was brilliant, risky, but it paid off. But this," he gestured at the script, "this isn't risk, this is suicide." "Why?" Beatty asked. "Because half the country supports this war, and the half that doesn't isn't going to movie theaters. They're protesting in the streets. You're making a film for an audience that doesn't exist. Maybe that audience needs to exist," Beatty said. The man smiled, not warmly. "That's not your job. Your job is to entertain people, not educate them, not radicalize them." Beatty stood up, not aggressively, just done sitting. "I think we're finished here. Warren, sit down. We're trying to help you. By telling me not to make the film I want to make. By telling you not to destroy your career over a script that won't make money and will burn every bridge you have in this town." Beatty picked up his jacket. "Then I'll build new bridges."
He walked out.
Here's what Warren Beatty understood that the men in that room didn't. The world was changing faster than Hollywood's power structure could adapt. The old model, where studios controlled content, distribution, and access, was cracking. Television was fracturing the audience. Independent films were proving you didn't need major studios to succeed, and younger audiences were actively rejecting the sanitized, establishment-friendly content Hollywood had been producing for decades. The men in that room saw risk. Beatty saw opportunity. He'd watched Bonnie and Clyde succeed precisely because it challenged conventional wisdom. The studios had hated it initially, thought it was too violent, too nihilistic, too critical of American mythology. Then audiences, especially young audiences, embraced it. Not despite its edge, because of it. Beatty had learned a crucial lesson. Sometimes the safest commercial choice is the most dangerous creative one, and sometimes refusing to play it safe is the smartest business decision you can make. The project didn't die when Beatty walked out of that meeting, it just moved. Beatty took it independent. He used his own money. He brought in investors who didn't have ties to the establishment. He structured it so no single studio or financier could kill the project. It was expensive, risky. If the film failed, he'd lose millions. But he'd keep control. The studios watched, waiting for him to fail. Waiting for the moment they could say, "We told you so." The pressure didn't come just from Hollywood. As word spread about what Beatty was making, other forces took notice. Conservative groups, political operatives, people who didn't want a film questioning American foreign policy, hitting theaters during a war. Beatty started getting calls, not threats. Nothing so crude, just conversations. People expressing concern, suggesting maybe this wasn't the right time, offering help if he wanted to adjust the tone. He ignored all of it. Not because he was fearless, but because he'd made a calculation. If he backed down now, every future project would be subject to the same pressure. Every script would be vetted, not just for commercial viability, but for political acceptability. That wasn't the career he wanted. So he kept moving forward. The film wrapped in late 1968. Editing took months. Beatty was obsessive. Every cut mattered. The tone had to be precise, critical without being preachy, political without being propagandistic. When it was finished, he faced a new problem: distribution. Major theater chains were hesitant. The same men who'd warned him not to make the film now controlled whether audiences could see it. Some theaters refused outright, others delayed, a few demanded cuts. Beatty refused every compromise. He took the film to smaller distributors, independent theaters, college campuses, places where the establishment didn't have veto power. It was a slower release, less profitable initially, but it built momentum. Here's what happened that nobody predicted. The film connected, not with everyone, but with the audience that mattered. Young people who felt betrayed by institutions they'd been taught to trust. They saw themselves in the film, saw their anger, their disillusionment, their refusal to accept easy answers. Word spread. Not through studio marketing, through conversations, through reviews in underground newspapers, through screenings at universities where students were organizing against the war. The film became something the studios hadn't planned for, a cultural moment. It didn't top the box office, but it didn't need to. It became the film people talked about, debated, referenced in political discussions. And Warren Beatty, the actor studios had warned would destroy his career by making it become more powerful than before. Within 2 years, Beatty's leverage in Hollywood had fundamentally shifted. He wasn't just an actor anymore. He was someone who'd proven he could operate outside the system and succeed. Studios that had refused to back him came back with offers. Not because they'd changed their politics, but because they'd recalculated the risk. Beatty wasn't a liability. He was someone who understood audiences better than they did. That made him valuable. And value in Hollywood is the only currency that matters. Here's what that moment changed. It broke the assumption that political films were commercial suicide. Not immediately, not universally, but enough that other filmmakers started pushing boundaries they'd avoided before. Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, Robert Altman, All of them benefited from the space Beatty had created by refusing to be controlled. The studios learned they couldn't veto content just because it made them uncomfortable. If an artist had enough leverage, enough conviction, and enough understanding of their audience, they could make what they wanted. The system had to adjust. The men who'd tried to stop Beatty never apologized. That's not how power works. They just quietly shifted their strategies. Stopped trying to control political content through threats. Started trying to co-opt it through financing. But the leverage had shifted, and once that shift happens, it doesn't reverse. Years later, someone asked Beatty if he'd been scared walking out of that meeting. His answer was immediate. No, I was angry. Angry at what? At being told I couldn't make something because it might offend people in power. That's not a reason. That's control disguised as concern. That clarity is what the system couldn't manage. If Beatty had been scared, they could have worked with fear, offered reassurance, made him feel safe. But anger that comes from understanding the game being played, that's different. That's someone who's made the calculation and decided the cost of compliance is higher than the cost of refusal. Warren Beatty wasn't feared because he made a controversial film. He was feared because he proved the threats were empty. The studio executives had warned him, "Make this film and your career is over." He made the film. His career got stronger. That exposed something the system depended on. The threat only works if people believe it. Once someone calls the bluff and survives, thrives, even the threat loses power. Other artists saw what Beatty did and thought, maybe I don't have to accept those terms either. That's the shift that changed Hollywood. Not because everyone became brave, but because someone had proven it was survivable. Real power isn't avoiding risk, it's calculating it better than everyone else. Think about the last time someone warned you not to do something because it would hurt you. Did you listen? And if you did, was their warning actually about protecting you or about controlling you? If this story resonated, subscribe. More stories about risk calculation and the moments when refusing to be controlled was the only way forward.